Okay, so I think we are good to get started. Thank you everyone for joining us here today for this month's edition of BIOtechnical Advocacy Lab. And I wanted to give a special thanks to everybody who tuned into last month's webinar, which focused on drafting and sourcing content. We are going to be following that up today with some interactive practice. I'm going to turn it over now to our colleagues at the Beekeeper Group to get started. I'd like to introduce Mike Panetta. Mike is a founding partner of the Beekeeper Group, and he manages a number of the firm's nonprofit, trade association, and political clients, and leads its embrace of mobile and social technology for political, marketing, and advocacy purposes. He's also an award-winning public affairs campaign strategist who specializes in using the internet and social media for creative issue advocacy and grassroots activism. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for that introduction. So today we're going to doing a content calendar boot camp. But before we start, just some introductions. Again, I'm Mike Panetta. I'm a partner here at Beekeeper Group. Today we're going to talk about how to source and create content. We're going to do something a little different today. My presentation is a little on the shorter side today because we're going to be asking for some audience participation later in the workshop, and we're also going to be hearing from Sepsis Alliance and the Epilepsy Foundation on what they're doing to develop motivating content for their audiences. So before we get started, we're going to jump into talking about planning your content strategy and developing content. But before we jump into this, it's worth noting that remember that it's important, though, you have to think through the things like who your target audiences are, what the messages are, what the information that's relevant to them, what's going to motivate them towards action. So it's important to think about that and the overall goals of your advocacy work as you develop content. But today, that's not what we're getting into today. We're gonna, we've discussed that sort of larger picture on other sessions, and there's lots of great information out there already to be found on those topics as well. But we're going to talk about today is sort of like where the rubber meets the road. The actual work of producing the content that delivers your messages to your target audiences, how to plan that message, how to plan that content, how to source that content and produce the actual posts, materials, emails that will feed your online platforms and advance your advocacy goals. So that's what we're talking about today. So as we get started, we work with a lot of clients to map out content strategy. And when we do that, we usually start with an editorial calendar. And this is very similar to what large publications do when they are mapping out sort of the issues across the year or what the topics are going to be throughout the year or the seasons. And for digital platforms, it's very similar. We work with clients to map out core themes and messages for a certain time period based on what they know about key events and other things that are driving the conversation as it relates to their advocacy work. So this is something we revisit 3 to 4 times a year as the overall issue landscape unfolds and comes into clearer view. So in this example on our screen here, you can see a screenshot of a snippet we developed for one of the groups we work with. And you can see for this example is the month of May, and there's some relevant touch points in here that we keep in mind. Like if for that client, it was the nursing week, mental health awareness month. So these are things that are going to be in the conversation, the larger conversation online. So we use these as touch points to look at them when we develop our own editorial calendar. We also look to see what else is going on in the news and popular culture that we can take advantage of. For example, we've created messages for some of our clients on healthcare related issues that take advantage of events like March Madness or the Olympics or election cycles, things that are going to be in the conversation that people are talking about. We put these into our editorial calendars, and when we're thinking about developing content, we're able to then leverage those. So I always like to tell people it's easier to ride a wave than create a wave when it comes to messaging. So having an editorial calendar like this lets you spot these waves ahead of time and get ahead of the curve in creating content. These documents also serve as a key touch point when we're thinking about what assets are going to be needed, especially when we're thinking about developing creative materials, the visuals, the infographics, the design social graphics, video clips, as these things usually take a little bit of a longer lead time. So having an editorial calendar lets you know ahead of time what content is going to be needed. It makes planning that content much easier. Obviously, it's important to be flexible with these. These are just sort of guide points, but they take away, allows the team to be more strategic in thinking about developing content, and developing content that's going to be more relevant, and therefore more people will see it and advance your advocacy causes. The next thing we do, once we sort of set the stage, the time frame with an editorial calendar, we start filling out a content calendar, and this is where we develop the real content for each platform, the actual posts, email messages, blog posts, social media things are going to be posted. So it's usually a spreadsheet that outlines the proposed publication date, the platform, the actual content that's going to be posted, and any links to external resources, visual materials, hashtags, and then a sort of a status of whether it's where it is in the pipeline. This approach really works well when there's multiple people involved, because it's easy to track changes, see what's approved, what's not approved, maintain version control, if you use sort of a shared spreadsheet like the one we have here. So in the next slide, you can see a little more detail in this example and see how we have the publication date, what platform, the content, we have a character count, we have the whatever we're going to be linking to as the URL, whatever media we're going to be using if relevant. So this way, whoever, if there's a team reviewing this, everybody can click through and see what are we linking to, what is the image going to look like. And then we have sort of the last thing you can see here is the status, and that usually we have when we put these content calendars together, we usually have a status field so we can see whether it's in draft mode, whether it's approved, whether it's scheduled, and whether it's published. And when it's published, we usually put a link back into where it is live. So this method works best to, if you have a lot of channels going and a lot of content, it allows you to work, we like to work at least 2 weeks ahead of time before things are published, because the whole idea with the editorial calendar and the content calendar is it makes social media, email, digital channels something that can be much more strategically positioned by your team to take advantage of a moment, instead of these channels becoming more of a chore that have to be completed, and it allows you to, without any real cohesive plan or just getting neglected. So getting an editorial calendar sets the large picture, and then the content calendar gets in is to actually delivers upon what you have in your editorial calendar. And the approach that we take here using this content calendar, it gets the team ahead of the curve. It gets content seen and approved by everybody before it needs to be published, and it makes it a much more seamless process. So the next thing you're going to say to yourself is, okay, I get that. I get the need for editorial calendars. I get the need for content planning, but where am I supposed to come up with all this content that I'm supposed to be publishing? And we have this issue too. It can be difficult at times to come up with new content, especially for the same set of issues, especially when there's not a lot of new news or new anything noteworthy going on. But here are some things that we do for the groups that we work with to help us find new material to post about. So one of the first things that we do, and this is, I think, something everybody should be doing regardless of whether they're working on social media or not, is setting up some Google alerts and social media monitoring for the issues that you care about. So I'm sure you're familiar how Google Alerts work, and there's also tools that are similar to Google Alerts that allow you to track social media conversations that the Google Alerts won't find. So like the Twitter posts, the Facebook posts, things like that. In this screenshot here, we have clinical research, clinical trials to set up generated alerts, but doing things like setting up for the disease states that you work with or the treatments. These can help you find stories that you may not have otherwise seen, or social media posts that you may not have seen to advance your advocacy goals. And when you reshare them with the right context provided by your organization, that can help advance your advocacy goals and communication goals with the groups that you're trying to reach. So the other tool here is the social media monitoring, and there's this is just a screenshot of one of them, but we use tools like Sprout Social or Cision, Hootsuite, Hash Tracker, or a few of the things that we used. to help us find other people's social media content that then we can repost, retweet, reshare, and amplify. Again, this is a great way to find some source material, but what you should be doing is then adding your own context to it as why it relates to your issue and why it's important to your audience, and then driving people to either some sort of action or to learn more. So this is just one of the tools that we use when working with groups, because like I said, there's a lot of times where there's just not so much from the organization that is going on that we can post about, but we need to find relevant material that can be put in the context for the audiences. Another way to do this is getting trusted sources of information, signing up for the newsletters and alerts from these informations, especially in the niche media that covers your topic specifically. Remember, as you're creating content, one of your goals is not only to educate and inform your audience, but to be seen as a broker of relevant information. So sharing relevant news stories from other sources is part of that. It helps to add your own context to these, why you're sharing it, why it's important. And sort of when you use a third-party news source, it's like a third-party validator that is reinforcing the messages that you're trying to deliver. But there's one caveat here is make sure, and this happens to everybody, I've seen it happen. I click through things all the time on social media that I see, and then it's behind some sort of paywall. So just make sure it's not something that only you have access to. Make sure other people can see it. You can test it in an incognito window or other ways to do that. And one of the other places where you can find content, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but your own website. Your own website, you can mine your own website for information that your organization has created, and then repurpose it for social media or email content or other things. It's amazing. I see how many groups will put out a report and they'll just tweet and just link to the full report, and that's all they'll do. Or they'll post a press release and they'll link to a press release PDF on their social. There's so much more that can be done there. So a longer report or something like a press release, I mean, that can be broken down into a series of shorter posts with like key takeaways or facts and quotes can be pulled to make graphics. When there's fact sheets, like some of the ones here from Bio, they can usually be repurposed into several pieces of content across multiple platforms. Again, breaking out key statistics or takeaways as sort of single serving pieces of information that you can do multiple pieces from that and then share that across social media. So it's important to realize there was an article in the Washington Post a couple of years back that looked at the web traffic for the World Bank and all their reports that they had out there, and all these great reports that talked about pressing issues across the world and potential solutions for them. But it showed that most of them had never ever been downloaded, let alone read. So it's a good example of there can be a lot of good material that's locked into big reports that people may not get around to reading. But if you can find a way to pull out some of the key content, create other creative pieces for it, or even just, even if there's no creative behind it, just pulling out some key takeaways and doing those as a series of tweets or Facebook posts. That's a great way to mine your own existing information and create content. So when you're putting together an editorial calendar, and thinking about what themes and messages you want to focus on, think about what you already have in your organization that may not have been utilized to its full potential, and see if there's ways you can grab that and use it. So next thing we're going to talk about is the importance of visual media. So it's really important to remember that social media is a visually driven medium. It's not just social media, but just the way the human brain is wired, that messages that are visual, people process visual messages so much faster, and they remember so much more of what they see versus what they read. So when we talk about visuals for content across digital platforms, it's not just window dressing to make it pretty. It really should be a core part of your content strategy. And I know many of you are saying, well, I'm not a graphic designer. We may not have those people on our team. Where am I going to find some compelling visuals to use for my for my content. So we have a couple places up here that we use, Upsplash, Pixel, Shutterstock, Pixabay, and Getty Images. The last one is a subscription, but and there's probably a half a dozen more we could have put on here, but all of these have great, compelling visuals that you can use to reinforce the message. So remember, when we're talking about, especially on social media, it's a very visual and it's a very mobile first. And what we like to tell people is you need to have some sort of what we call thumb stopping moments where people are just kind of scrolling through their feeds. You want to be able to have some sort of visual that's going to stop them, capture their attention, which will then drive them hopefully to read your post and click through and and get that information. But that is why visuals are really important. So here's a couple examples we can use, and we'll send links to these as well. Another thing that's important to remember is that video is the most influential medium on social. It's the best performing content on social. And there are some platforms that are emerging like TikTok that are only video. So we, at Beekeeper, we create a lot of videos, custom animations for clients, but they're great, but they take time and they take resources to produce. But there are tools that you can use to create video content and other visual content besides just video content that are easy to use and cheap to use just to create some video content. So one of the platforms we recommend the most for people who want to do this on their own is Canva. It has templates for social media platforms that are already pre-sized and the right dimensions. They already have built-in text and animations and transitions. So there's a lot of the work's done for you already. You just need to customize it and put in your own message and your own content. So there are other ones to look at as well, but if you're struggling to find good custom graphics, or you want to make some short videos, and you don't have a team or the resources to put a lot of resources into it, Canva is a great tool for that. So that was what I was going to talk about today. But before we turn it over to our guest speakers, we're going to do a content boot camp. And this is where we want to be a little more interactive. So here are the rules. In the chat, which we'll post in a second, we're going to share an article. Here's a screenshot it over here. What we'd like you to do, people on this call, is read the article and then draft a post for Twitter. Find something from this article that you think would work well for your audience. We'd also like you to find a piece of visual media that make a visual piece of media that you think would accompany the post. And then if you could share what you've drafted via the chat. So a couple of examples, and has anybody posted the article in the chat already?
Yes, I did, Mike.
Yeah, we did. Okay, great. Thank you. A couple of examples here, and these are for LinkedIn and Facebook. Again, we want you to do something on Twitter, which is obviously shorter. But these are sort of generic examples. What we'd like you to try to do is think about your organization, who you represent, and that article that we posted about the Apple Health app and the sort of the new features that are with it, that come with it, and post something on Twitter about it, but pivot it towards your organization's goals, your organization's advocacy goals and messages, and try to customize it so it's relevant to the target audiences that are in your social media feeds or your digital platforms. So I'm going to also post, so we want you to do a tweet, and we want you to do, I don't know if I'm able to cut and paste, here we go. We want you to also find a piece of compelling visuals to use with that. And in the chat, I don't know if I can do it. Natalia, I don't know if you're on the call, if you could post some of the links to Pexels or Unsplash or some of the things that we shared so people can have.
Yeah, sure. And you can also just add in a recommendation if time doesn't allow and you really want to focus on the content. You can just add in, like, what I recommend is looking for a stock image with exactly what concept of a stock image you would want.
So we're going to give you about 3 minutes for this. So we'll stop at 12:23, according to my clock here. And let us know if you have any questions in the chat. Again, we want you to read that article, come up with a tweet, So again, that's only going to be 140 characters and a piece of visual content to go with it.
Mike, while they are working on that, I just had a couple of quick questions. So as you were saying, the editorial calendar should be updated quarterly, twice a year. So that is something that's kind of more broadly based, correct?
Yes.
And then the content calendar is where you get more into the nitty gritty. But my question is, obviously, the atmosphere on the Hill is ever changing, especially this year. It seems like something is being reintroduced every week. How often do you suggest updating that content calendar?
Well, the thing with the content calendar is it needs to be flexible. So that I think I should have said that when I was talking on that slide, is that you have your editorial calendar, which gives you the broader themes when you know it's insert the awareness month, things like that. And then when you get into the content calendar, that's when you're actually drafting the real content that's going to go out on those platforms. But we usually like to say, okay, you're going to have a certain percentage that are sort of pre-thought through because they're in line with whatever the month is, whatever that time period is, the editorial calendar. But there's going to be slots in your content that you're producing that are going to be in the moment. When something's breaking on the Hill, when something's in the news, if there's something that that you weren't ready for it and came out that wasn't in your, it's not going to be part of your editorial calendar or even your content calendar, but it needs to be done. So when we're drafting, when we're creating the content calendars for the groups we work with, there's always some slots that are going to be relevant, or they're relevant for what's going on right now. You can pull things out. I mean, the idea with all this stuff is you want to have content that is timely and relevant for your audience. So you need to be flexible, and there's something that is timely and relevant that's going on right now. It needs to be inserted into your content calendar.
So almost plan for those immediate announcements or fire drills, if you will, and kind of anticipate, okay, this might happen on this day. We're going to have to be flexible and move things around to accommodate.
Yep.
And then just one quick question on some of the tools you mentioned. So Google Alerts and Canva, can those both be accessed for free, or are those a paid service?
Google Alerts is free. Canva is free to a point. And then there are premium features.
And they do have some specials for nonprofits. So I would look into that for the premium in Canva.
And I will say, given that I have no graphic design experience or really any artistic talent at all, I have used Canva once or twice, and it is very intuitive and easy to work around and very user-friendly.
And there are other tools out there as well. Sometimes we recommend Animoto, which is Anmimoto, I believe. And that's another tool to make videos. It's a video editing software you can use right on your computer. So if you just want to make something simple, if you've created a video in house with your iPhone and you want to do some cleaning it up and editing it and adding some titles to it, it's a great tool for that.
And you mentioned TikTok as a platform that is solely video. Are you seeing that more with nonprofits and different advocacy campaigns using TikTok as we kind of move into that era of social media?
Yeah, we are definitely. It's something we're keeping an eye on, and we're seeing a lot of groups starting to use it. One thing I always like to remind people is just because you're not using something doesn't mean it's not happening there. So a lot of times you're not your target audience. So I know groups, for example, I know like the American Heart Association has a great TikTok channel, and they do a lot of really creative things on there. And there's other advocacy groups out there as well. Everything, I like to joke that everything's a fad, because it's the fads happen right here and right, they're popular right here and right now. But when you're working in advocacy and public affairs, like that's where you need to be, right here and right now. So again, thinking through where your target audience is and what are the messages that will move them, and then that will move them, then think about what are the platforms and the content that I need to deliver upon those messages.
And I feel like that is even more so true now in the nature of the pandemic, given that we are not doing these in-person meetings, we're not able to host live events. And so it just really shows the power of social media and being able to bring people together virtually.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think our time's up. I don't know if we've got any examples. I haven't seen any in my chat. but it could be homework maybe people take home with them if there's nothing to show here today. I don't give people another minute if they want to post something, but I want to make sure we have enough time for our guest speakers as well.
Definitely. And maybe if anybody has an active social media campaign or an advocacy campaign that's taking place now, one that's coming up in the future, one that's happened in the past, I would encourage you to drop that in the chat as well. We would love to share that with the rest of the audience. You all are doing amazing work. And so as much as we can leverage that and learn from each other, that would be fantastic.
Well, with that, why don't we turn it over to the guest speakers?
Sounds good. And before we do that, does anybody have any questions on any of the material Mike's presented today? All righty, well then we will jump right into our guest speakers. I am thrilled to announce our first of two guest speakers here today. I'd like to introduce Michelle Bareng, who works as the Epilepsy Foundation's Brand Marketing Manager, and she's going to be touching on the Epilepsy Awareness Month campaign that is coming up this November. So welcome, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I have my headphones on. Okay, cool. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Bareng, and I am the Marketing and Branding Manager of the National Epilepsy Foundation Office. I'm happy to present our upcoming Awareness Month and share with you our process and thinking about the development of this campaign. A little lesson about epilepsy. Epilepsy is a spectrum condition of the brain causing seizures, and it's also known as a seizure disorder. 1 in 10 will have a seizure, and 1 in 26 will develop epilepsy during their lifetime. There are many types of seizures, some that you may not notice when someone is experiencing them. Someone is said to have epilepsy if they experience 2 or more unprovoked seizures separated by at least 24 hours or after 1 seizure with a high risk for more. The Epilepsy Foundation is here to advocate for the 3.4 million people living with epilepsy and their families. Along with our local partners, we provide community services, public education, federal and local advocacy, seizure first aid training, and research funding into new therapies and treatments. November is National Epilepsy Awareness Month. This month is the time when our community rocks their purple and shares their stories about epilepsy. Every year, we at the Epilepsy Foundation want to ensure that we are amplifying their efforts as their stories must be heard. Next slide. When we were thinking about the theme for this year, we were thinking of how we as the Epilepsy Foundation could utilize and increase the strength of our community. We all know that stories are the driving force for National Epilepsy Awareness Month. This time is where our families are empowered to share their journey filled with accomplishments and challenges to further their overall story of epilepsy. Because of their willingness to share, we see more action and participation in epilepsy awareness. We had to consider several things for this campaign. We didn't have a big budget, and we knew we had to be somewhat creative for this to be motivating for our community. We considered places where our campaign was going to live. Based on our resources, we decided that a digital campaign using social media as our driver would be the most optimal. We had to consider our audience on social media. Our audience on Facebook is a little bit older than our audience on Instagram. And obviously each platform utilizes different features for engagement. We had to consider our objectives and where it was going to be for this campaign. As a team, we felt that our stories needed to inspire conversation and provoke action. Our biggest challenge was how we are going to generate this much needed content. We leaned on using stories from our community blog, eJourney, to highlight the challenges and triumphs of our community. Although the content is not new, we believe that these stories from one platform can resonate with our audience during this month, and we could repurpose usage of the content here. This repurposing tactic was helpful, especially when using our content from in-person events across the country. Next slide. So thinking about this and knowing that this would be a digital campaign, we wanted to have messaging that would resonate with our audience online. We thought of remove the filter as our overall meaningful call to action. Living with epilepsy can have its challenges. Some people with epilepsy hide their disorder, which can lead to feelings of isolation, helplessness, and even depression. Adults with epilepsy oftentimes experience changes in their quality of life, such as mobility, relationships, employment, and social interactions. Children and teens with epilepsy find themselves feeling isolated and misunderstood. They may lose friends, may not be invited to birthday parties, or may be ostracized, or even teased or bullied. Through our social media campaign called Remove the Filter, the foundation asks everyone to remove the filter and make a difference. We hope that with their stories, the campaign can help. Remove the filter of fear to hide one's epilepsy, the filter of ignorance so that more people know what to do when they see a seizure, and to remove the filter that downplays any accomplishments, like being seizure-free, even if it was a short moment. We feel that this theme will spark conversations throughout November. Next slide. So here's a snapshot of activities that our local partners are going to promote during November. We encourage our community who have not submitted an e-journey story to share their story after reading our featured warrior heroes. We highly encourage that everyone takes one of our seizure first aid trainings. This is probably one of the most sure thing knowledge anyone can know to help someone who is experiencing seizure. Again, 1 in 10 will experience a seizure in their lifetime, but 10 in 10 can make a difference for the 3.4 million people living with epilepsy. Although our primary target audience was not kids, we still have activities that promote the general theme and calls to action related to the campaign. And of course, being a nonprofit, we had to consider fundraising as part of this awareness effort. Many of the campaigns listed were made in-house. They were made adapted through programs like Canva and Adobe Spark so that our local partners can add their local information to the graphics. We had to consider all the different places the campaigns would live on the website, social media, and our digital correspondence. Although this campaign is very minimal in logistical planning, the digital opportunities are countless. You may see that we have opportunities with CBS and iHeartRadio, but this part of our campaign is in cooperative partnership with the CDC. Content has already been made, but we wanted to update our networks so that they may see assets from the partnership in their local stations. Next slide. Here are some of the creatives that we are using for this campaign. The campaign slogan is "See the whole picture." As you can see, see the whole picture, get the whole story, remove the filter, see the journey. As you can see, our example, Cody, is an epilepsy awareness ambassador. In the first 2 slides, we put Cody behind the filter, behind 2 filters. In the 3rd slide, we put Cody in front of the filter in full color, symbolic of the idea that epilepsy is more than the person and that everyone can take action and be in front of it. Next slide. Again, November is National Epilepsy Awareness Month, and the Epilepsy Foundation is leveraging its community strength to reduce the fear surrounding epilepsy and bring hope to those facing challenges. Through a social media campaign called Remove the Filter, the epilepsy is asking everyone to remove the filter. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you so much. And we are really looking forward to everything that's going to be taking place in November, only 2 weeks away. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle while she's on the line? Well, I have a couple. First of all, I wanted to say I think it is a fantastic idea. The idea of how you played into that idea of social media and really honed in on the Remove the Filter campaign. I think that's really clever, especially for today's day and age and everything that's going on. We are all virtual. We're all seeing those Instagram posts. So I love that you all played into that. I had a quick question. So you mentioned based on the different platforms, you were tailoring your content to different audiences. Facebook was a little bit older, Instagram was a little bit younger. Did you all do studies into that to get those demographics, or is that something that you had done previous research on?
No, so on our platforms, we were able to see who our audience base is. So I get on our back end of our social media platforms and Sprout Social, we were able to see who our audiences was. So we do a little bit, we do different contents based on each platform. And so we thought that we had to adapt that practice into our campaign. So Facebook, there's going to be a little bit more static storytelling, almost similar to Humans of New York, whereas on Instagram, I think we're trying to do reels, videos, and GIFs more to highlight like the person going in front of the filter. So that's a little bit more engaging and people are drawn to like the idea of what we're trying to say. So that's in the works. We have that coming. We're excited. We're just, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but I wish we had an example of the GIF, but we know that on our team's timeline, like, that's not due until Monday. So
we have that to look forward to.
Yes.
No, but I think it's so important. Like I said, in this day and age, there is so much going on in terms of advocacy campaigns and social media. So definitely utilizing all of those different tactics, like you said, reels, GIFs, storytelling is a great way to engage a wide array of audiences.
And Mike's right, like, especially for an advocacy organization, we definitely have to utilize what's in the present. And so finding messaging that resonates with your audience is helpful. And we thought like, perhaps like this is a way that we could speak to both generation or both audience groups at the same time. Because on social media, people know what a filter is and just the idea of relating it back to how people tell their story in general. And to the different audience that they tell their story to. Like, we just want like everyone to be comfortable in sharing their story and that, they are contributing to the larger epilepsy story overall.
And just going off that note, like you said, catering to the different age groups and the different audiences, epilepsy doesn't discriminate based on age or race or gender. So it's so important to get that message out there as widely as possible.
Yes.
But thank you so much again,
Michelle.
Michelle.
I have a quick question, Michelle.
Yep.
This is Michelle. I may have missed it and I apologize for that. But when do you typically start planning for each of your campaigns for the November campaign? How far in advance?
I think so. Our planning's a little unique because our team has experienced a turnover. So we actually started this 6 months in advance, but because there was a bit of a hiccup, we definitely did not have our planning until like, I think last month. And so we typically start 6 months in advance, but this year was special. So we try at least the 3 years that I've been on this national team. I think we do have I think the team tries to have the assets 6 weeks in advance, just because our local partners, that includes both, as we formally call them, chapters and affiliates. Affiliates are independent 501c3s, and they just share the same name and programs that we do. And so they need a little bit of time to, like add their information, see how they can make it applicable to their region, just because every region in the United States, they have their own twang to themselves. And so we try to typically have it 6 weeks in advance. But this year was just special. So
I understand. We all work for patient advocacy groups.
Yes.
We get it. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Thanks, Michelle. Great question. Does anybody else have any other questions before I turn to our second guest speaker? All righty. Well, thank you again,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
And we are very excited for November, and we will be sure to check in on all of your campaign tactics, and we are very excited to see what's in the pipeline. So our second guest, I'd like to introduce Alex Sadorf, who's the Director of Communications at Sepsis Alliance. Alex graduated from the University of California, Davis with a BA in Communications. She started with the Sepsis Alliance as the events coordinator in 2017, and then she went on to support operations and stewardship before moving to communications and marketing. So welcome, Alex. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our Sepsis Awareness Month campaign. So our Sepsis Awareness Month itself is in September. If I could go to the next slide, please. We started in 2011. Sepsis Alliance designated September as Sepsis Awareness Month, and it's been picked up now all over the world, actually, and World Sepsis Day itself is on September 13th every year. And every September since, we've invited individuals, healthcare professionals in every area of medicine, and organizations big and small to help us save lives by raising awareness of the leading cause of death in U.S. hospitals. I underlined those points so you can see we have 3 audiences for Sepsis Awareness Month that we try to communicate with at the same time. And then also of note, this was our 10th anniversary of designating September as Sepsis Awareness Month. Next slide, please. So just to provide a little background, as a communications person, have to know our social media makeup. We know we're majority female. We know we're majority sandwich generation. We also can see on LinkedIn and Twitter that we're talking to medical and industry professionals as well. And Facebook and Instagram are more our general public audience. So we always keep that in mind as we're creating our social media strategies. Next slide, please. So yeah, these main takeaways is that we're speaking to the sandwich generation, which is this generation of people who are caring for both children as well as their aging parents in the same household typically. We're also talking to majority female, which is pretty spot on. We do know that the majority of our users for Sepsis Alliance Clinical Community and Sepsis Alliance Institute are nurses. And we know that 87% of registered nurses and 88% of nurse practitioners identify as female. So this lines up with what we know for our site as well. In addition, they tend to be tasked more with the care of children and aging parents. And this children and aging adults piece is especially important because those 2 populations are more vulnerable to sepsis. And then we also like to tailor our messaging and content to the professionalism of the audience. Senior hospital and healthcare workers are more able to implement changes, and that's our audience on LinkedIn. So we want strong calls to action. Next slide, please. So when it comes to sourcing and drafting content, I always like to start with our calls to action for the month. So Sepsis Awareness Month itself is an actionable item. We want to provide information to help people spread awareness, but we also hosted our Sepsis Alliance Summit, which is our annual conference in September. So we had to work that into the plan. We also, not this past year, but in years past, we also have our Sepsis Heroes fundraising gala that we have to work in. We also have Sepsis Awareness Superhero Challenge, which is a fundraising virtual event that takes place all through September. So we had to work those in. We also knew proclamations is a piece that our audience really helps them feel actionable. So we have to work in information about getting proclamations done in your state as well. So about 4 CTAs for the month that we had to prioritize. We had to look at their dates as well to know, okay, so Sepsis Alliance Summit is coming this week. We're going to spend the week before that really pushing this. Whereas Sepsis Awareness Superhero Challenge, we can push further after Summit. So organizing within the Sepsis Awareness Month, what calls to action we're using more strongly at what point is a really important piece. Then I like to check what has worked well in the past, look at previous years and see what's really been successful so we can try to mimic what's worked and we can try to change what didn't. And then I believe we discussed this a little bit earlier as well, but looking to our own materials, deciding what to update, what to make new, and then also always sending back to our website. Our website has so much more information than we can share in one Facebook post. So making sure we're sending people back to the site, we're making it easy to find additional information, and making sure that we're giving them enough content there to keep them intrigued. And then another piece is we really like to empower our audience to support our work. We want to give them the tools to continue on this mission of raising awareness. Next slide, please. So our paid social media strategy, we're always ready to adjust based on response. Typically, we will do 2 different posts. We'll put $5 into each, and then whichever one has performed better after that $5, we'll put more money into, and we'll take the other one down, unless they both perform well, and then we'll consider something else. But typically, there is a very obvious winner in that category, so we'll put more money into that. We also like to target an audience that doesn't follow us, but lines up with our demographics. We know this female identifying audience, and then also the sandwich generation audience. So we like to go for that same group, but that doesn't follow Substance Alliance already and follows other public health organizations such as the CDC or WHO. We also know in our paid social strategy, when we're talking to people that aren't familiar with Substance Alliance, we need to define sepsis. It's not something we can assume people know. We do an awareness survey every year. We know a lot of people don't know what sepsis is. So we have to provide a little bit more background as well in our paid social strategy. Next slide, please. When it comes to our organic social media strategy, this is where that toolkit comes in, where we have empowered our followers to do the work for us almost. We provide graphics with our branding. We provide suggested copy that others can use for free. One beautiful piece that we created last year or the year before is we made a Sepsis Awareness Month logo, and it has the URL sepsisawarenessmonth.org on the logo. It comes back to our site, but anybody is welcome to use that logo on their materials. We in fact encourage it, but all the while that is tied to a URL that we own where we can provide additional information as well. So we provide that for free to everyone. And this toolkit is also downloadable for free. There's information about proclamations, social media graphics. There's ideas for engaging people in your workplace. So I recommend checking that out as well for ideas. It's at sepsisawarenessmonth.org. We're also always ready to adjust based on response. We can't change current posts, but we can boost high performing posts. So we'll also put some budget into seeing what posts are performing well on our organic channel and then trying to boost those and see if they will also perform with other audiences. Again, just understanding our audience. We know our medical provider audience doesn't need as much background or definition, but we know our general public audience, it's always helpful to provide a little bit more context, not quite as much context as our paid social strategy, but still some. We also know real stories. I think the other speakers have all mentioned this. People, it's so important to put a face and a real person to what we're trying to say. So we know that including real stories, real sepsis survivors, real lives lost to sepsis is what's really going to make it personal and bring people engaged. Next slide, please. So our overall results, we did 6 paid social ads, 4 sponsored posts. We had a really good click rate. Our average cost per click was 17 cents, whereas the average, according to what happens when you Google average cost per click, is 96 cents. So we're extremely happy with that number. Next slide, please. And then this was just our overall results on our organic posts as well. As you can see, it varies slightly. We do use a lot of our content on all of our channels, but we know our LinkedIn audience doesn't like to see quite as many posts, so we do a little bit less there. Twitter is higher because we do a lot more retweeting, resharing, and then Instagram is just slightly less than Facebook. So I have some bolded pieces here too. We had our highest total monthly reach ever on Facebook. Twitter, we had our most monthly mentions ever. And this one's particularly important to note because that mentions it's easier to track in Twitter than other places of people using our tools and tagging us. So that's really the number I'm most proud of, is that most monthly mentions ever. Knowing that people were using our resources, they were tagging us, they were doing what we hoped they were going to be doing and what we empowered them to do. So that was really great. Next slide, please. Here's just a couple things from our toolkit. That index is just to show what's all included in our toolkit. It's always important to include usage instructions as well. That is probably actually the most emails I get during Sepsis Awareness Month is, how can we use, or can I use this logo? And it's like, okay, well, we created a usage document that shares all of the information you need to know. So it's really helpful to have that written out and be able to send people directly there. And it also empowers the rest of the Sepsis Alliance team to be able to send people there, so they don't have to filter everything through me. We can do a lot faster answers. Also key messages, and that's just some really important top level sepsis facts that people can use when they're communicating about why it's important to have this awareness month. Our logo, 50 for Sepsis Awareness, is the campaign for proclamations. Digital communications had some of this, sharing graphics and content ideas. Patient community engagement was full of ideas for engaging your community, including some examples of how hospitals and health systems raised awareness for Sepsis Awareness Month, and then also Spanish resources, which is an area we're really trying to expand in. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to share a couple of our top performing posts as well, just to give an idea. This sepsis is a public health crisis was top performing on all channels. And this graphic, we actually were able to create in all forms. So Instagram stories, Instagram post, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. And that was another important piece in our toolkit. We created all of those graphics in all of those forms to make it so easy for people to grab it, use it, share it. And then we also had somebody independently, without any notes from us or anything, they went to their state building and got them to light it up for Sepsis Awareness Month, which was just incredible, and it really resonated with our audience. Next slide, please. And then these were just a couple more. We had a big push around our founder, Dr. Carl Flatley. He actually participated in the Sepsis Awareness Superhero Challenge. And for his challenge, we typically ask people to go 1 mile doing an activity of their choosing. He actually did the whole Florida Keys, which I think is 212 miles. And we got some NBC news coverage on that, and we shared that on all our channels, and that performed really well, because again, it's a real person with a real reason behind why they're doing what they're doing for sepsis awareness, and that's what really speaks to an audience. And then, of course, GIFs, as we've mentioned before, people like moving content, so we're definitely trying to expand our video and moving content moving into the future as well. And I think that's the end of my presentation. If there's any questions.
Alex, thank you so much. And again, a huge congratulations on this campaign. I was able to follow along on social media and some of your live events, and it really was just so well done and so informative. So again, huge congratulations. That is fantastic. Does anybody have any questions for Alex at the moment? Well, I have a few.
Sure.
Well, you talked a little bit about your process for paid posts, and I was wondering if you could just go a little bit more in depth about that. How do you choose those 2 posts? How do you choose the platform? Is it typically graphics, a video, just a story, just a straight up post, or is it a combination of any of the listed options and just kind of testing to see which one does better?
Yeah, we've tried quite a few different things. Me and my social media specialist, Lauren, who's just incredible, we have played around with a lot of different ideas over the year, and we haven't necessarily cracked what always works, but I think we're getting much closer. And we've found simple, whereas faces and real stories tend to work well for our audience. They don't necessarily resonate with this paid audience because they don't even know what sepsis is to know that this person, that's a big deal for this person. So we do try to stick more to sort of this infographic style. Also, videos and GIFs work really well for a paid social. It's almost cheating because then we get to sneak 10 pictures into one post as opposed to one picture. So we do know that the video works well because you're able to get a little bit more information out in one post. So we're constantly trying new things. We're constantly being surprised as well. There's been a few times where we can't believe what's taken off, which is why we're just constantly monitoring it, and why we started the strategy of just putting $5 into a couple first to see what performs better. And I guess an important note also, when we're doing that, we're sending them to the same audience, or very, very similar audiences. So we're comparing as close as we can, apples to apples. So it's not necessarily dependent upon the audience, what's resonating. So, but then we do try. We've tried to engage other audiences as well. For instance, we've tried the 35 to 45 age range, and that the below 35, and they will just not pick up our material. So, which is also interesting because that's our largest website audience age. So we are working to try to crack that one. But yeah, it's a constant moving piece, trying new things. I unfortunately don't have the 100% success model, but we're trying to get closer to it.
No, and to your point, and going back to Michelle's presentation as well, I think it just goes to show how important it is to know your audience. Like you said, those paid ads, typically the paid audience isn't as familiar with sepsis and what it is, so it doesn't resonate as well to see a sepsis patient. And so I think that just goes to show how important that is, and how you really have to tailor your content based on the audience that you're trying to target.
Yeah, it's that audience, and knowing that audience as much as possible is really the strongest tool you can have, I think.
And then you mentioned your Twitter tracking. You had the highest amount of mentions. Congratulations on that as well. I was wondering if you could touch on, have you all ever tried anything with hashtags? I don't know if you had hashtag Sepsis Awareness Month or anything like that. Have you seen that to be beneficial or a good way to track engagement?
Yeah, that's actually something we have worked really hard on this past year, especially with other campaigns. Like we launched a big AMR campaign and worked on finding a hashtag that hadn't been used before, which is very hard now. But yeah, we try to use hashtag sepsis awareness, hashtag SAM 2021, I believe is the other one. And hashtags are the easiest to track on Twitter. A lot of people, Instagram and Facebook are now private, so we can't see necessarily if people are using hashtags, which is something I always have to remind, our higher ups that people are likely using our materials. It's just we can't see it if they're private. But yeah, we try to use hashtags as much as possible, relevant, unique hashtags as much as possible, so it's easier to tell what is coming back to us. But also knowing our audience, I think any audience as well is gonna, sort of freestyle hashtags a lot of the time as well. I would say that's one of the harder things to get people to pick up, but we're trying.
That's a good tip about the unique hashtags, because I imagine if you just clicked on hashtag sepsis, there would be hundreds of thousands of posts.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword with the unique hashtags, because it's getting people to use it because they want to use just hashtag sepsis. But then how beneficial it is for us to be able to see our engaged audience who's actually using the hashtag we want. So
definitely. Well, does anybody have any last minute questions for Alex, Michelle, Mike, or any of us on the team before we close out? All righty. Well, Alex, thank you again. Again, huge congratulations. Michelle, thank you for joining us as well. And we will be looking to November for your all's campaign. I think it's going to be fantastic. I just wanted to let everybody know our next webinar is going to be taking place on November 4th. So you should be receiving some information about that within the coming weeks, but I will give you 2 minutes back of your time to enjoy your lunch. So I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.